Hey dudes, Sylvite Soltis here, and today I've got another installment of Memories of Vanilla for your viewing pleasure. Last time, we dove into the dungeon known as Zul'Farrak for the first time, and while the adventures there were numerous, we eventually finished it up and headed out. Well, today we're going to fast forward a bit to another dungeon. After all, it's been like 13 years, and my memory of time is a bit sketchy anyway, so we might as well jump around a bit, right? Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy as I recount the tale of my first adventures in Maraudon. And more specifically, the aftermath of my decision to tackle this massive, cavernous labyrinth. It was spring break of 2006, a few days of rest between the third and fourth semester of my sophomore year of high school. And I distinctly remember that I didn't have work at the local pizzeria that day. Waking up at 10 a.m. or so, as you do when you're 16 years old and don't have school, I immediately fired up my computer and logged into World of Warcraft. After all, Leica was at work, and I had the account all to myself for the next 6 hours or so. And so, I began my adventures, running around in some high level 40 zone. I don't remember exactly where I was in the big wide World of Warcraft, but I do remember that at some point, about an hour after logging in, I got a whisper from someone. "Hey, you want to heal Maraudon?" Well, I had time to kill, and since I'd never done this particular dungeon, I decided it could be a fun experience, so I agreed. And what followed was among the most painful and intense, but rewarding experiences of my early WoW career. I joined the group of 4 other adventurers, who had clearly all been waiting for a healer for some time. Noticing they were all around level 50 or so, I figured I might be a little bit too low at around level 48. However, they reassured me, saying that it would be fine so long as I stayed in the back of the group. With a sigh of relief, I headed over to everyone's favorite zone, Desolus, and began the first portion of the adventure, trying to find the entrance to the dungeon. Now, I had a general idea of where this dungeon was located, having accidentally run into the entrance back when I was questing in this zone a few months prior. But nevertheless, I ended up getting lost and needed the warlock in our group to summon me. Yeah, I was that guy. But eventually, we were able to zone in and begin the dungeon itself. Now, this particular part of the story is really fuzzy, as there were so many different subzones and monsters in this dungeon. But as we progressed slowly through the caverns, I distinctly remember 3 big events happening. The slow-moving slimes, the one satyr boss, and the loot drama with him, and that larva spawning tube somewhere in the orange section of the zone. I don't remember exactly what order they came in, and even now the full dungeon is too big and confusing for me to remember it all. But here's basically how it went. I'll start off with the slimes. As we approached this large pack of slimes in one cavern, our tank warned us all not to get too close to them, as they would completely demolish anyone they touched. I, however, tried to keep everyone alive as they broke this rule, and subsequently got healing aggro, and died from the slimes as a result. Now luckily I was soul-stoned, thanks to the warlock, so I was able to res up and we narrowly avoided a wipe. But this was definitely a first. Who puts overpowered but super slow-moving slimes in a dungeon anyway? Anyway, after getting considerably lost in this massive labyrinth, there was another room, this time a purple area with satyrs and treants spread throughout. We fought our way through the demons, eventually coming across a room with a single satyr stood in the center. Lord Viletongue. Our tank, likely one of the least experienced ones I'd met until that point, which is saying a lot, charged right in and pulled the 2 stealthed satyrs in the process. Oops. As a result of the unexpected chaos, we wiped, and made our way back to the entrance of the dungeon. However, in the process of running back in, we all followed one person and ended up in a completely different entrance than the one we'd already cleared. Being a group of noobs, however, none of us really knew why it was different and full of mobs, so we simply began pulling the trash and moving forward, again, as slowly as ever. Eventually, we made it back to that room with the treants and the satyrs, and we carefully moved up the stairs where Lord Viletongue was located, this time ready to take him on. Using some CC, line of sight, and careful kill targeting tactics, we defeated him and were rewarded with a dagger that had some bonus shadow damage as a chance on hit effect. Now me, being a shadow priest, I instantly rolled neat on this. After all, more shadow damage was always a plus, right? Well, not exactly. You see, we had this rogue in our group who was less than thrilled when I received a melee weapon. After all, the chance on hit was for melee attacks, not spells, and while I didn't really know the difference, he clearly did. Calling me a ninja, which, I mean, is fair, he dropped the group, and we had to head back out to find a replacement. We'd been in here for a while now, getting lost and fighting slimes for something like 2 hours. But hey, I was enjoying it. I still had plenty of time until Leica would be getting home, so I could play to my heart's content. Eventually, we got a replacement and headed back inside, making our way into a large orange room with a bunch of larva creatures. We passed through with relative ease, but as we continued toward the water elemental boss, we kept getting attacked by randomly spawning larvae that we thought we'd already killed. After about the 4th time this happened, we decided to backtrack and found that they were coming from this strange tube-like structure hanging from the ceiling. Definitely weird and a little bit creepy, to be fair. But we right-clicked on it, destroyed it, and were able to progress further. Time was flying by as we made our way down to the waterfall and into the final stretch of the dungeon. It was already around 3 p.m. by the time we started working our way up the rocky slopes and caverns that marked the near end of the dungeon, and I was super eager to see the ending to this amazing place. However, as we made our way up a massive hill, a message popped up. Disconnected from server. Weird. Naturally, I immediately logged back in, and was greeted with my character on the screen. However, within just a couple of minutes, the message popped back up again. Disconnected from server. Uh-oh. Yes, Leica had gotten home from work. I had spent all afternoon running around Maraudon with this group and would not be able to finish it. Or could I? I called him up, explained the situation, and begged him to let me finish the dungeon. He wasn't in a great mood that day, but after a few minutes of my begging, he agreed to let me have another hour or so just to finish up. Delighted, I logged in and explained to my group that I had just had some internet issues, but that I'd solved it. And we moved on. The final stretch of the dungeon was brutal though, with all of the mobs being significantly more challenging than they had been until then. Somehow though, we persevered, albeit very slowly, until the last room was all that remained, with Princess Theridras waiting on her island in the middle. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was Leica. Another hour had somehow passed as we were slaughtering crocolisks and rock elementals. I answered and said that we were literally at the princess, despite having at least 2 more packs of stone giants standing between us. He very angrily told me that he didn't care, but being the bro that he was, I managed to convince him to give me just another 10 minutes. It was time to do or die. I told my group that I had to leave for work in the next 10 minutes, and that we had to finish this now. We pushed through with renewed speed and swiftly pulled that final boss. Through sheer dumb luck, or whatever it was, I managed to keep up our tank, despite being nearly pushed off the edge multiple times. With only 2 minutes to go after that phone call, the princess fell. Collecting our loot, I sighed and thanked the group for the fun, just in time. Disconnected from server. I hope you enjoyed my rather long story of my adventures in Maraudon. Now, this story in particular, while a bit foggy in my memory, is one of the fondest I have of classic WoW. Back when I had the time and the reason to adventure in a dungeon for hours on end, not knowing what to expect with each turn. Also, it's the single event that resulted in Leica giving me his second account, paying for the character transfer of Sylvite from the first account to do it. I don't really remember if that was a feature when the game first came out, or exactly when it came in, but I do remember that at this point it was possible. After all, Sylvite safely made it from account 1 to account 2 somehow, and it only took 72 long hours. Blazing speed. All jokes aside though, I'm really glad that all this happened, as it eventually meant that I could play with my friend and my brother at the same time. But it also meant that I now had to pay for my own account. This was no biggie though. I had my local pizza job to take care of that $15 every month, and it did its job pretty well. But anyway, that's it for today. If you enjoyed this story, remember to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications when new content is released. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter, and check out my blogs over on Blogspot. Also, consider becoming a patron on Patreon, as I've just set that up and could really use your support. Thanks for watching, and as always, take it easy, guys.